Okay, we'd like to call the capital improvement meeting for January 17th, 2019 to order. It is 1:08, and we have sort of an open-ended agenda. Our first order of business was to discuss the Munson capital improvement plan that was passed out last week. It was done by the Collins Center. And,
I didn't speak at these, but there are 10.
okay, thank you. And again, as was mentioned last week, the town of Munson, which is what this capital improvement is a town very similar to the size of ours. The school system is very similar. And looking at some of the projects that they have on their capital plan, it very much mirrors our situation here in Douglas. Don't know if maybe they might be in a little bit better financial situation than us at times, but in any event. So, did anyone have any thoughts on that they'd like to convey to the board, the committee rather, on things that might have stood out to them in the Munson capital improvement plan, and how it might be beneficial to us here in Douglas?
First of all, I thought it was very good.
Right.
As you can see, I read cover to cover.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a couple of questions. First of all, and I think only Matt can probably answer it, but I didn't know if the selectmen have a copy of this.
I don't believe they do yet. I think, I know Matt had pointed it out to me. I looked it over last week and then a little bit more this week. And then we had copies printed for you folks so that you guys could look at it. Again, looking at, from what I've seen,
Yeah.
if you look at a lot of the projects,
Yes.
boilers,
It
fire
was-
trucks, ambulance, it's all the same
Highway
type of
trucks.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Highway
Yeah,
trucks.
yeah.
But also they included buildings,
Correct.
which to me is
Yeah.
very important.
Recreational fields,
Yes.
everything is it's
Open
very,
space,
I think it's very well
sports
put together.
fields.
Absolutely.
And even, what else was it? Quite a bit of funding for the library, which was good. But again, one of the things kind of stood out was, on page 10, it said they use, what was it? 1.5% of the taxes for capital stabilization fund,
Right.
which I thought was interesting. They also have town council, a 2/3 vote of town council is required. So that would be something we'd have to change if we use this.
And pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, we've just waited for the free cash number to come out.
Right, and they're
Right.
not encouraging that you use free cash.
Right, it's
If
just
it helps.
one part of the equation that
Right.
could help.
The way
Yep.
Matt did explain it to us was that his goal is to start funding that before free cash, before everything
Yeah.
else. So-
He did, yep.
And then I just, so it's 1.5% of the stabilization fund. So we have a stabilization fund,
Well, okay, what was it? I think that was Lawrence, has a state mandated capital reserve fund, which requires the annual investment of a 1.5% of the amount of property taxes
Right.
committed for the preceding fiscal year. Was it? Maybe we need to have some discussion on that, if in fact that's the route that looks like it would help, but
yeah.
again, and it would have to be something we gradually probably work
Work on,
into.
Exactly.
Right.
What else was
A
there?
sort of, you can't eat the elephant all in one bite type
Right.
of approach.
Yeah.
Right. But I like the fact that it includes a number of funding resources,
Mm-hmm,
rather than just relying on what's left over with free cash from the
Yes.
previous year, so.
yeah,
Those are obviously discussions that go beyond us,
right.
but food for thought, for sure.
And one of the other questions I had was, on page 16, you're looking at water and sewer debt, and I think we need to have some really good communication between water, sewer, because, in this report, they didn't feel that they needed to include anything for any new big plants, but my question is, okay, so would you have to upgrade the sewer plant or extend the water line? I think that's something we'd always need to look at.
Well, I think the water lines, if we had more money, would have been done.
Yeah, they put
They
in several
scored
years
very
of-
high last year,
Yes.
and in order to expand economic development, you gotta put water in. So,
Absolutely, yep.
So, again, good
Mhm.
information for the discussion.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it goes beyond us, but it's good information for us to have.
Right. The other one was on page 17, looking at their capital planning evaluation criteria. And a lot of it is what we do, but I think it's more concise and,
Mhm.
Yeah, ours is very general,
I
whereas
may
I
be
found this
wrong,
was
but
more.
speak up.
No,
I think you're absolutely right. Some of the questions here were much more precise than some of the ones we have.
Right.
Does it improve an existing facility?
Yep.
What's the anticipated useful life? We do that. Does the proposed project replace a piece of equipment needed to provide a public service? And then, I know people don't like to hear about legal and liability, but that's
Yeah,
very important,
Nowadays, it's
absolutely,
everything.
especially like the booster station up there. I mean, having water be in the station and you're fooling around with the electrical, that
Yeah, that
it
was,
gives me chills to think about it.
right.
But also then, in addition to each of those, then they listed, aesthetics, historic preservation, cultural, recreational opportunities, and again, economic growth, education, environmental sustainability, public health and public safety, which we kinda almost lost last year, so that's my input.
Yeah, I like, does the project reduce potential legal liability or threats to operations?
Yep.
Does it improve the customer service or provide a needed service? So those are certainly some things that are important, and I think some of our projects like really fit into that area.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses the example of replacing a street treatment before it finally just completely breaks down.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Fortunately, as we've learned, with all our vehicles, we kind of run them into the ground before there's nothing left that no one wants,
Hey, we're
No,
doing
right.
better, right, John?
Yeah, but that's what
I
ends up
know.
happening. As your ambulance blew the
Oh.
motor on the way to the trade-in,
Yeah.
as a highway truck blew the motor on the way to the trade-in, that's
I know.
exactly what happens to us because we
Yeah.
use them so long.
Yep.
We get everything out of them before they leave.
And when I talked to Mr. Wojcik when that happened, he says, well, apparently you were correct when you said you needed a new ambulance.
That's right.
So we basically we waited so long and we lost the $4,000 trade-in value.
Oh,
So-
not good.
And that's, unfortunately, those are the ambulances we're putting patients in. So there's a huge legal liability there, so. All right, so in looking at this, and I was hoping to have Matt's input on this as far as, I guess we sort of transitioned into the question of, well, looking at this report, how does that affect our rating process? We wanted to try and improve our rating process before we actually did the rating and started inviting the department heads in to actually give us their input on what their needs are. So that criteria there that's mentioned in that report, I think really is there's at least a couple of 3 questions I see there that really need to be put into the rating process as well. And then Matt had talked also about, when, the list, when we have in other words, we got extra points when something was on for 5 years, we got
Yeah.
extra points. Does it make sense just being on the list because it's on the list, or do we wait to say, okay, we start with how many years past its useful life is it beyond, or is it getting close to the end of its useful life, or is it beyond it?
Mhm.
Right.
And then rating a percentage as far as awarding points when it's at or beyond, and then, deciding what type of point system or how many points it would be awarded based on that it's past its useful life.
You did give us a handout here that has examples.
Evaluation tools.
Evaluation
Right.
tools, so it does kind of give us a little bit of
Okay.
it.
So see, we were all set to go this one, and
There's more in it. Curveball.
no,
It's good to see other ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think what's
that should
gonna,
all kind of fit in here.
we sent out on Monday or Tuesday, Tuesday, we sent out to all the department heads, the
Okay.
instructions
Yeah,
for the evaluation, or an instruction for what their vision is for their department. What do they expect, they anticipate the needs to be, and I think he wanted a 5-year plan, which
Yeah.
I try
Is
to
this
always.
for
put-
capital?
Yeah.
Or for operational as well?
No, just for capital.
Capital.
The operational's part of the budget, but this is just for capital alone. In other words, all right, in my situation, what do you need for vehicles
Right.
coming down the line, or what do you see 5 years down the road, or what's your plan of how the department runs? An example would be, there's been some discussion before, well, why do you need 2 ambulances? Because that's the standard, that's best practice, and the reason is, your call volume's up, you're able to answer more than one call, and then if you do have an ambulance that's down, you have a backup. If you don't, then that affects the operational budget, because now you're not getting that revenue. But even more important than that is the safety of the citizens. So that's just one example that I'm speaking of, being a department head of the department I tend to sit on, I'm on. So, but I'm sure that John can think of stuff, I'm sure that Adam can think of stuff. But what I think Mr. Wojcik would like us to do is to look 5 years down the line and say, okay, what is your vision? How do you want your department to operate, and how does the capital equipment, well, obviously you can't run a fire department without fire trucks and ambulances. But what are your needs? Where are you at? How old is your ladder truck? How old are your tanker trucks? Being that, 70% of the homes in Douglas are out of the hydrant district. So that being the case, you need a ladder truck more, you need a tanker truck more, or an engine. Just looking at it from a fire department perspective. I think he wants us to look at it, put it on paper, and actually give a narrative as to the 5-year idea of what direction your department's going in and where you're at. How far down the road are you at?
I mean, for years, we've kept, I can tell you my projects alone, I laid out a 5-year every year, and then what doesn't get picked off, you kind of just smash it down until you keep, you stretch it out you keep stretching it out, and as we all know, we've been lack of funds for years, so that's what ends up happening, and then the ones that are failing right now that have to be done end up at the top, and then, and hopefully one day we'll be at the point where we can be projecting out, more, because the funds will be there,
Right.
instead of, like you said, taking whatever we have left over for free cash, coming in and saying, we have $75,000 and we have to figure out what we can do with it.
But I gotta say that when I put my capital, and it's not completely done yet, but when I started putting stuff together, it was nice to have items crossed
Yeah,
off the
I
list
agree.
that you didn't
Sure.
have to worry
Sure.
about anymore,
Absolutely.
But,
We've waited so long, the other stuff has crept up that far as
Exactly.
well.
right,
You
and
know,
was it you, Shirley, last week who mentioned that as soon as you put something into service, it's now getting old? It's already, it's starting, the time, and the clock has started, it's
Yeah.
already, its useful life has started to tick down, so.
absolutely.
you
The
know-
other thing we have to think about too is the fact that we just keep growing. There's more projects, people coming in. It's, you know, like you say, why 2 ambulances? Well, look how we've grown since
Gosh, yeah.
5 years ago. So,
And it's, quite honestly, I've been in fire and emergency services for 30 years, and stuff that you approached 30 years ago, it's like the cell phone analogy. Technology changes,
yeah.
but also the laws change, and you have to keep up, and if you don't, you can get yourself in some serious hot water.
Yeah.
Right.
I look at medical control for EMTs now. You know, 30 years ago, you didn't have, if you wanted to start an IV, you had to call a hospital and you had to get permission from a doc. Now you have standing orders. But now you have a whole spectrum of medications now that you have to
Be knowledgeable
watch
to
over and
administer.
have knowledge of, and if you misuse it,
Yeah,
it's ugly.
that's right.
So that's just an example of how some things have changed over the past few years, but.
There was something addressed in here, probably, I underlined a lot, but I'm not sure exactly where it was, but it, in addressing what you're saying about, oh, well, how long it's been on the list. But sometimes it's not, you just have to bypass that because there's something that's become more important.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, you can put, I could put everything on the fire department on a list.
sure,
Doesn't mean I need it right away.
but it may change.
Yeah, exactly.
Because times change.
Well, you
and-
project out, even myself, even looking at it today, I was starting to work on my capital, and I'm projecting out 5 years, and I'm like, okay, the resource room windows, the second floor windows, like, now those are 25 years old, you know, so in my head, I'm thinking already 25, you know, we're at 25 years on them, it's something to start thinking about. Not that it needs it, not that I'm at that point, but you're there, you know.
But then
Five-
again, when we get there, there may be something else that
Exactly.
takes
Kick it
more
off.
Yeah, of course,
precedent.
it kicks it
So
off
then
and it does again.
yeah,
Yep, I agree.
I had one of the guys come in this morning and says, oh, by the way, the halogen lights don't work on the ladder. Okay. So I go, well, we got the ladder, it's almost new. No, it's not, it's 14 years old now. But then I'm thinking, okay, it's a halogen light, now everything's LED lights.
right,
And even though it's a garage in a building where it's protected,
yeah.
it aged out, it's aging out already. I'm like, but, I mean, it
So
has a
again-
lot of years left, don't get me wrong, but
Again, try and project on your building and what are the vehicles gonna be like?
Right.
It's difficult. I mean, I remember when we first voted to get a new fire truck, and guess what? The fire truck wouldn't fit in the,
Little fire station.
yeah.
That was the Ford tanker.
And,
Oh,
and
really?
it ended up in
That's
a highway,
Schuster's, no, it
Oh,
ended
that
up
one?
down
Oh.
at
That
Schuster's,
was before me then.
yeah.
Wow.
And you know what? In the people's defense, back then, they weren't writing grants, they didn't
No,
have a
that's right.
process.
No.
That's right.
Because everything was a call volunteer
Right.
thing, and,
Right,
but the other thing is, Uxbridge just went through it.
yeah.
They built a new station and the room was flying around, the ladder truck didn't fit. And guess what? The chief made a video, it absolutely fits, but it's, somehow the rumor mill gets
Of
going.
course it does, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Forget about that.
yeah, really.
Well, but I understand the same thing with the post office. Right now, we have an issue with the post office clock tower, the lights don't work.
Oh,
So I went up there and we got a check, took the bulbs all out, and they don't make the bulbs anymore, and now you have to change them to LEDs.
And that's what the problem is with the ladder.
Yeah, I'm just like,
It's
here
like-
we go, you know?
Halogens, they don't make the bulb now. It's like, are you kidding me? There's gotta be somebody that makes that bulb, but, in any event. And it's like, oh, for $1,700 a piece, you can replace the whole light. And I'm like,
Isn't that nice?
okay.
I know, I'm in the same boat.
All right, so this is definitely some good information, but I think it's gonna require some more
well,
Yeah,
evaluation.
there's a lot to
time.
it.
Yeah, there is.
And,
I do like though how they have brought out, it's very similar to a lot we've been doing, but it seems to bring it out in a more positive note. And so something. we
Well, I like
can-
this evaluation tool, examples of priority one, imperative, must do. Seems like that's what we've been the past few years.
Yeah.
But priority two, essential, should do, and priority three, could do. I mean, that's a simple way to look at things.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take all your stuff, put them in lists of priority one, two, and three,
Yeah.
and then, you know, based on what you have for money, but obviously you gotta try to do the priority ones. But, that's actually a pretty simple way. You say that, looking at it,
Yeah.
at first glance, but I'm
There's
sure
always
there's all kinds of
difficulties
stuff
with
that
everything.
enters into it. Then we have, criteria and strategic plan area, public health and safety, degree to which project meets public health and safety issues. Then you have, score, highest, medium, low impact.
You go to the next page and it breaks it down even more.
I gotta be honest, I think one of the most important things we've done since Matt has been here is with our budgets. He had us do a 5-year budget last year, so that once that went through, that's set,
Yeah,
and it's really outside of any real huge issues. It's pretty much gonna set your budgets.
yeah.
And you might have some, obviously raises with, you know, contracts and stuff like that, and, but I think it makes this a simpler process.
Mhm.
Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the override passing gives us like $500,000 a year for the next 3 or 4 years to start with anyway, as far as capital money. And that might even be, if you put, I could be completely wrong, but that's before free cash.
Okay.
So we'll have to probably get a definite on that from Matt.
Would have to
Yeah,
tell us.
But I think, I think I'm right on that, but,
Well, like he said, his goal was not to have to take it out of free cash at the end. His goal was to fund the budget, capital, and then work from there, you know, and not just wait till what's left over. Because when we keep waiting till what's left over, then we don't have enough to do anything, you know, and then things get older and things cost more and we keep going down that road.
and where we've been is, as we mentioned earlier, was, I mean, there's years we had no money,
Mhm. And couldn't do a capital.
couldn't do anything, we just, we rated stuff,
Yep.
and then, you know, we had years where we had some money, so we took the low-hanging fruit and funded those things.
Or
Just
whatever, fit into
be
the
able to
budget.
do something.
Yeah.
But then you get so far behind because everything just keeps getting left.
Mhm.
And the buildings continue to deteriorate, the vehicles, whatever, continue to deteriorate. And then it all kind of comes on you at once and you can't operate that way.
Mhm.
You're living on like a
whim.
vehicle, you're living with a 19 whatever
Mhm.
Model A, but it's newer times and it just can't work that way.
Right.
So, not that I'm an advocate of going out and spending money, because I'm not.
No, we
But
can't
you
be
have to be
frivolous by any
real.
stretch, but we have to, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
you know what would be good if we, you know, once we decide or what we're recommending, and input from Jean and Matt, because Jean can, you know, the figures and it's good to see what's available, what we've still got out there paying, when it's going to come, you know, off the books and.
Right. Right. I think Matt said there was something falling off in 2023. And then it goes back to the voters. Do you want to keep it where it's at and try to fund some stuff? You want to just keep things level?
Yeah, and if, well, we all have our own thoughts on that, but it takes some stuff, you know, keep it level, in my opinion, so that you can make improvements to keep up, so that it doesn't, again, all hit you all at once, but, and times change too, so. And hopefully there'll be more grants out there and, but,
And, you know, I think, quite honestly, the town's been very good and successful at grants. And without those grants, it would be in a lot worse situation.
yeah. And there's some we can't apply for because we're too wealthy in the eyes of what's
Right.
available, you know, because there are a lot of areas that are worse off than we are. But,
All right, so, on item number 2, perhaps we give it another week and meet again and look at, and maybe we could come to a consensus and after talking to Matt, at what approach, what actual tool do we want to use as an evaluation criteria?
I agree, that's probably our best bet with Matt's opinions, and, you know, go through all the stuff again with the stuff he just gave us, and try to come up to a consensus on it.
He was supposed to also give us a report on where we are with last year's projects,
Right.
but,
So I'm sure we can probably have that for next week. I'll talk to him about that and try to get that for next week, and then maybe we can nail down what changes, if any, we're gonna make with our evaluation tool, and then I would say after next week, well, we put a deadline of the 25th for the
yeah.
department heads to have their information into Matt, what their projects are. That's the 25th, next Friday. Hopefully with the drop dead deadline of the 1st, but we told them the 25th.
and then we have to get after the,
Hopefully nobody's watching,
oh, come on.
as far as department heads anyway. So, and then, if, I don't know, I think, maybe we could have Matt, will give us, see where we're at with the current projects, and then maybe something from Gene as to where there are other things that have been funded but haven't been done yet because of certain reasons. So maybe we could line up those,
Yeah.
have two different lists, the ones of the projects that are completed, the ones that are out there that have been funded but not yet, maybe,
Yeah,
some of Adams are like that.
yep.
The fire alarm
Oh, yeah.
panel.
We talked about those last
Last
And
night.
it's just, and it's not his fault, it's
No,
the way it
like
is.
Shirley and I, we
No,
we
we're on
talked
the
about it
same-
last night, it takes a year for anything, by the time I get the funds to say yes, and then, Ellie knows, and then you start the process of all the building facilities committee, and then engineering, and then putting out bid documents. to-
Studies and,
Everything to go through it all, it's a year. It's a year before you even,
And in the meantime, the price has gone
and it
up.
goes up, and we deal with this all the time,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's just how it works.
yeah, they say usually stuff goes up like 3 to 5%, so I always try to figure at least 5%.
Oh, yeah, it definitely goes up, if not more, depending on construction costs, especially buildings.
And
So-
I think more so when, you know, the economy is still pretty good, although some people don't feel it, and I understand that. But we're not in a downward trend yet, but
So, we'll talk next week about the evaluation tools, try to come to a consensus with that. I'll get two lists of the current projects and those that have been completed versus current.
Should we have copies of our existing rating sheet too, so we can know what? we're
Oh,
gonna-
yeah. Well, we've got to decide what we're going to put on.
That's what
on
I'm
the
saying, just
existing.
cross, yeah, the one we
Yeah.
already, and just either say that's not useful
Yeah,
anymore.
that would be a good
And
idea.
then, yeah, and then just go
No?
from there.
Yeah, I mean, I had a copy of that last week, but I know there's stuff that we probably want to cross off because it's too general.
Yeah, but I think it would be a good idea.
Absolutely, we'll
to
take a
bring
look
that
at
up.
it,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So where we're at so far, Mr. Administrator, is we're gonna probably meet again next week to go over the added information you have from the evaluation tools. Quite frankly, I like the one on the top there, the priority 1, 2, 3, and 4, but, I mean, we can talk about that, and I'm sure you have some input.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this, but I actually have to try to do the math to see if I can do it.
I looked at it.
This is Sigma,
Yeah, no.
that one?
Yeah. I used to the
Brandon had it
You do this.
figured out. You got that one?
Oh, I didn't.
I'll tell you why, the only reason why it is interesting is that it takes into account where we really stand with useful life and, you know, kind of separates out what's really going to drive you to excess repair costs and puts them into the quadrant in the upper right as being the highest priority. So it's an interesting way to look at it. Now, if it becomes too difficult, I don't think it's so difficult
No.
to run that, so. But we have to do it with actual data and see where it takes us. Well, the Munson plan had a lot in there about roads. We're not really gonna be fully operational on this assessment of pavement assets
It's gonna be a while yet.
until next year, so that's
Yeah.
really next cycle.
Mhm.
So I would just ask that you put some thought into a very simple score sheet for this year's paving budget.
Okay.
And what you think is, you know, and why.
Mhm.
And we'll settle on those. The capital is everything, it's not just what comes out of town meeting, it's chapter 90, it's
Mhm.
grants, the grants that we choose to pursue over others, because we don't have limitless time. Those are things that we have to put in our capital plan.
That was a question I had. I made the statement, I don't know if it's correct or not, but with the override, did we sort of like earmark like 500,000 a year for the next few years? And then maybe free cash on top of
That's the number I'm
that?
trying to drill down on, is that a feasible
Right.
approach? It might be for this year, to do a capital allocation off the top. So we're trying to take the budget model and kind of turn it 90 degrees on its ear just a little bit. Start with revenues. Agree on a revenue figure, and then once you understand what it is you're gonna do for revenues, then you allocate to capital and operations. And operations, you know you're gonna take the schools off the top, you know your fixed costs are gonna come out of that. So a personnel supplement, budget document would take your personnel, whatever's left is your bottom line expense budget. And you balance the budget in that fashion. So the only thing that would flow through to free cash would be unanticipated revenues or turnbacks from departments. This is the way it's kind of always been, but it's cleaner because there's no claim on it. You know, when it gets to the bottom of the flow, it's done. A capital plan is also how you're gonna fund it. So it's a valid part of the conversation that is like a whole session to itself. And it's, you know, what does the group recommend? Is it, what a lot of these speakers at the conference said was, it's always a blend. You know, you need to have a free cash policy, and it's, you know, you got stabilization, you have OPEB, you have these other demands on free cash, then you should be rolling some forward to give yourself some cushion. But some portion of it is usually used to spend those really pure one-offs. You know, that thing that you just really have to have and never gonna buy again for the foreseeable future. That's an appropriate conversation if you certify a high enough number. But then there's the other instruments, capital exclusion, debt exclusion, and non-excluded debt, and operational funds. So what is the right blend?
Shirley, Shirley mentioned in the report from Munson, did they do a 1.5% of the overall budget and sort of put that in there?
No, that wasn't Munson.
Oh, that wasn't Munson? I
Yeah,
thought
it
it
was.
was.
It's in their report, but it said Lawrence.
Oh, Lawrence.
Has a state mandated capital reserve fund, which requires the annual investment of 1.5% of the amount of property taxes
Oh, of the property taxes.
committed for preceding fiscal year.
Mm.
And they allocate that.
So that's just another way to look at it. I mean, just another, it's just a suggestion, or it's an idea.
Yeah,
It's an idea.
so that's roughly the range that a lot of towns are. Some of the wealthier communities are higher.
I think
2.5.
we started out, when we first started doing a capital plan, we were saying like 2%.
That
But it
sounds-
wasn't
Like
yeah.
I've heard that somewhere
the
before.
2%, but
in
I
the years
don't, I'm
here.
not sure the 2% was of the property taxes, okay? I think it was 2% of the budget. So,
Yeah.
but we couldn't keep it up because the economy was
Right.
going down.
So 2% of the real, of the tax levy would be about 300,000 a year. That sounds like a much more.
And I, it's for some reason,
Workable
true,
number.
that
Familiar.
sounds very familiar.
Oh, yeah, it was 2% of the budget.
If it's 2% of the budget, I wouldn't go along with that because there's everything that's in there.
I know.
Chapter 70 is
Right,
stuff that we don't
right,
control
right.
at all.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Marking against that, that's rough.
No, yeah. I mean, that was a start. Been in this too long.
Okay, so we definitely want to look at this and study this a little bit, the evaluation tools anyway, and sort of come up with, I would say it's got to be fairly straightforward and simple. The simpler, the better. But the other thing we wanted to look at, and we were going to ask you for, and then you came back, so, is maybe if we could get a list of the current projects, where they're at, and then the ones that might have already been funded, but the money's still there, if we could get a list of those two separate
Yes,
things.
I promised it for today and I just,
It's-
yeah.
understand.
I have it.
It's fine.
There's a substantial sum. But as I think it's been Ellie that's proved, brought this point up, not all of it can be reprogrammed carte blanche. It has to be, you have to follow the rules. If there's money from an old account. You know, so if the account was set
You sound
aside
like
for.
me.
No, I think it was you. If the money was set aside for a 30-year asset, and then you underspent it, and the money's still sitting there, you can reallocate it, but you have to reallocate it to another 30-year, you know, a similar.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing I argue against, because I don't like that sort of stuff. I want it to go to the taxpayer, back to the
Yeah.
taxpayer, so.
But would you argue against it if it went to the library?
Well, you're never gonna, this committee is never gonna vote for the library,
Well,
so,
we've
you know.
already started
And
this.
knowing that, we already just spent $115,000 on
Yeah.
the building.
Well, finally, yeah, it's working now.
Yeah, but a lot of us have been, for a while, saying we need to look at this green community things. Other
Yeah.
people, other communities are taking advantage of it.
I mean, and we were, I know,
So we got it this year, and we have plans to compete in the competitive round this year. That's due in March.
I mean, this committee's written letters to the selectmen about the library needing to be funded before too, so.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're on both committees. Do you
And I got my
feel
library card.
like we need both building facilities and this committee?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, just curious.
Take different approaches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to find a way to
I
always
think
have a
that's a
forum.
good question, though, because I question stuff like that. Just listening to the selectmen's meeting the other night, and you talking about personnel, that it's a part-time committee with not the expertise, and it's the same with the capital and buildings and facilities, you know, that, is it, are you, or, and just as you had pointed out, it's a year's process to go through all these committees, you know, that are part-time. And It's a long, long
It is.
process.
It does, and it does pull it, it is tough. I mean, it does add the cost list. Shirley and I have been through it many times together, and it does add on the cost from the start to the finish, you know.
But also the people that have been involved in both committees and just on the building and facilities, they ask some good questions and they're knowledgeable and so then it brings up more things that need to be looked at before it's
moved on.
And
it's
quite
doing it.
honestly, you need people with expertise,
Yeah.
because even
Yeah.
as a department
You
head,
don't
Yeah.
know everything, I don't.
and I know Adam and I have talked about this.
Yep.
I might have a problem with my boiler, I can get 3 different vendors in that will tell me all 3 different things. Well, who do I believe if I don't have
Right.
knowledge of boilers?
Right.
Exactly. So,
Sorry.
That's just one example.
I do have to leave. I have an appointment for 2.
Bye,
So-
Shirley.
Bye.
All right, so yeah, we'll definitely, when I get back to my office, we'll, because I have those reports in Gene, it's just a matter of putting them in an understandable format and
That sounds fine.
printing them out. It's not,
So, and then next meeting, we'll work on the criteria
Yep.
and finalize that.
And is next Thursday around at 1 good for everyone?
it's good.
Right, so we'll plan on next week at 1. So before we adjourn, do we have any old business we want to talk about?
Do you have a schedule? I mean, because you had already said that there was a meeting next Thursday, and I think.
Actually, I didn't have it in my book, but there was this week, and then
Next Thursday we come.
next Thursday, and then the following day is the deadline for the department heads to have their information in the mat. And, I mean, next Thursday, we haven't gone out further than next Thursday at all.
Yeah.
So
think
I
these-
say we
these
stick
meetings were
with
just to
next.
try to wrap this up, and then, like I said, then we'll have our normal department heads
Right.
in to do it after that, but I agree with you.
So I would say we just stay with next Thursday right now, and then we'll go from there, after next week, we'll try to schedule out.
Okay, so I won't be here.
Okay.
But you're not taking votes right now either, are you? On
No.
anything? So it doesn't really matter if you have a quorum or not, does it?
No, we're just trying to come up with the process, really, and.
Yeah, I mean, you might take a vote on the process. though.
Right.
I'm questionable for Thursday next week because of
Okay.
a court case.
All right.
It's in the morning, but who knows when.
Well, if we have a meeting next week and we don't have a quorum, we'll discuss whatever we have to discuss, and then bring it to the next meeting when we can vote on it. Really, but we'll do it.
We had that with
Been there, done that.
building facilities last night, and had just an informational session on stuff, because we didn't have a quorum. And it would be nice to have more outside people and a board like this, even building facilities, it would be more nice to have townspeople involved.
Feedback.
Just townspeople on the board,
Mhm.
Yeah, but if you can't get people,
I know you can't, I
you can't
agree.
even get
It's hard.
participants
I
to the
know.
meeting,
I
so.
agree.
uh,
It'd be nice to have more,
All right, so, any new business? Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn. Moved by John, seconded by Adam. Any discussion?
Aye.
Adjourn it is.